And good afternoon to colleagues who are joining us from around the country. Um, by around the country, I also must say Scotland. A call out to Ellie and some other colleagues as well. We'll start in a few minutes, but in the meantime, if I just give you a little bit of an orientation exercise, because this is a webinar. We can't switch on your cameras. We can't switch on your voice. If you have a query or a question, please, please, please use the Q&A function, which you'll see on your toolbar. My colleague Hamdi will be keeping an eye on questions coming in, and if we can answer those questions on the fly, we will. If we can't answer the questions, we'll email you afterwards. So we'll make sure that you're always in the loop. So please use the Q&A function. We also have captioning, and again, that can be switched on the toolbar at the bottom as well. So the captioning will enable anyone who likes that approach, and both Joey and I will attempt to enunciate our words clearly and precisely, so that the automatic captioning works well. Introductions while we're waiting for a few more people to join. My name is Marius Frank. I am the co-head of education here at Microlink. Microlink is a company that works not only with schools, but cut its teeth, if you like, with businesses and universities, making the workplace accessible for anyone who might be neurodivergent, who may indeed have long-term illness or accident recovery. In other words, anyone who has barriers to thriving in the workplace. Companies come to Microlink for the solutions. And for the last 3 years, we've been trying to spread that expertise into the schools around the world, and especially across Europe. So I think we've given people about an extra minute to join. So I won't stall any further. But before we begin, I will love you, please, to while I'm doing the introductions, use the chat pane to introduce yourselves. It's wonderful to know where people are coming from and maybe why they're interested. But do say who you are and where you're coming from. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Joe. Joe Fernandez from Ireland. Joe, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Thank you so much, Mark. I was just going to drop a little note in the chat as well. Yeah, my name is Joe Fernandez. I'm founder of ALPACA. We're a Trinity College Dublin research project, and our thesis is basically to make the invisible visible early when it comes to identifying underlying needs in children. Very excited to be here. Very much looking forward to telling you more about what we're doing. And please, as Maria said, any questions, any queries, happy to field anything that comes our way today. Thanks, guys.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. So, without further ado, I'll share my screen and we will begin. At Microlink, we are always on the lookout. We are always on the lookout for technologies and applications that will actually make a difference. And how do we measure that making a difference? Well, it's things that will help teachers, help young people, but also help school budgets. I am an ex-head teacher. I stay in touch with. I think I've got links into over 1,000 schools across the country at the moment. I realise what the pressures are, not only in the way schools are inspected, but also in the way school budgets and scant resources are managed. So we're always on the lookout for things that will make a difference. And ALPACA, when we saw it, we got on the phone to Joey immediately and said, this is something that we at Microlink would like to run with. So what we are going to do today is celebrate and illuminate what ALPACA can do. And okay, a lovely fluffy mammal, of course, but it stands for something, and it stands for Assessing Letter and Phonemic Awareness Class Assistant. Can you spot literacy challenges before a child can read? Can you give teachers laser-guided insights to supporting reception-age children to become better readers? And can you actually, through that, stop young people from being excluded? Well, look, if an app can, we believe Alpaca can. And hopefully, in the next 10 minutes, while I introduce Joey, I'm going to set the landscape why Alpaca is so relevant today. Not just about send budgets and costs and assessments, but now the curriculum review, new Ofsted imperatives, and the basic solid principle. If you intervene early, and you help early, you save lives down the line. I am hugely worried about two national statistics, and I really hope many of you in the English system are as worried as I am. In the last year of full facts, that's 2023 to 2024, there were over 900,000 suspensions in the school year and over nearly 11,000 permanent exclusions. If you take a school year to be 192 days, that is 5,000 suspensions a day across the school year, up by 1,000 from the year before, the highest figures on record. In the national statistics on absence, 1.6 million children are persistently absent. And if you look under the skin of both of those national statistics, young people on SEN support or with EHCPs are disproportionately represented. I work with around 80 youth offending teams across the country through another line of work I do. Young people with special educational needs are hugely overrepresented at all points in the criminal justice system. A colleague of mine in Milton Keynes, who arranged for detailed speech, language, and communication needs assessments of their children, found that uh, nearly every single child entering a youth justice pathway had degrees speech, language, and communication needs, conflated by perhaps co-occurrence of other conditions such as ADHD. And we know from national statistics that the long-term consequences of missed opportunities has a singular route to failure in life. There is something we've fundamentally got to do about it. We are also aware and know that there is a massive pressure on school budgets, especially those budgets assigned to SEN support and EHCPs. There are huge council deficits growing, and they are still growing. And councils are warning of a total collapse. By the way, when you get this slide deck, you will see hot links at the bottom of your PDFs. You will be able, to click on those links and follow up anything on these slides. Just needed you to know that. We at Microlink have looked at the runes, and we believe the pressure of supporting young people with what we call invisible disability or hidden needs is growing because of awareness, because of the principles of understanding, if you like, what neurodivergence is. And there is a zone, isn't there? There is a zone that nobody wants to talk about and nobody actually really wants to address. And that is that some young people who may be in a zone at that transition point between the detection of a speech language communication need or a neurodivergent condition are lost to the system, as that picture shows. Because of this spectrum, if you like, of need, The British Dyslexia Association also reckons that 70% of learners with dyslexia go unnoticed. They go completely unnoticed. Why? Because they're compliant young people. They're really positive. They want to be in school, but they are failing dismally to reach their full potential. And as you can see, many have spiky profiles. They're great at oracy. They might be brilliant at creativity and thinking. The specific learning condition that's holding them back may be reading, and that would impact on many young people's writing. We know about masking. We know about the consequences of meltdown, and we also know that constant cycles of masking and meltdown in later life might lead to mental illness. Now, lots of solutions have been promoted. One of them was a Matt Hancock suggestion, which is every child has to be screened. Every child has to be screened. Well, okay, show us the money. It's possible that one of those screening assessments might cost anything between 300 and say £400 for a detailed assessment. And then you've got to ask yourself the question, when? Because we know that some of these learning difficulties aren't necessarily expressed in early years. Where will where will the funding come from, let alone the assessors? Um, some people are saying, "Oh, AI will support this." I don't believe in a million years that a technological solution on its own, where the assessment is done on its own, will work. I don't think it simply will. Um, so when there was a call for evidence on the curriculum and assessment review last year, and when they asked about to what extent English and maths primary assessments support pupils' gains, well, of course, we had something to say because they also asked about the phonics screening test at the end of Key Stage 2. Um, our response, thank you so much to a wonderful woman called Maureen Hunter, a real uh, early years specialist in this area. Um, she made the point that preparation for this phonics test started in reception, where children who should be playing, who should be learning through play, are really pushed through the literacy mangle in order to meet the phonics screening test targets. The DFE's data shows that it makes no difference to a pupil's reading age by the time that they leave primary school. What's the point in doing it then? And also, you get this sense of failure already. And when for 1 in 5, of the 5 and 6 year olds, because they have to sit the test again, further squeezing the time. What we proposed was let's get a screening tool in there, something that's easy to administer, something that gives quality data straight to the teachers. And you don't wait till the end of year 1. You do it when the children start. We were hopeful that the curriculum and assessment review might take some of those comments we made and may just influence things. Well, we hoped, but actually all we got was this. Some tests work very well. For example, the reading test in year 1 and the times table test in year 4. So they thought it, and so so that there was that thing, and then they said we think government should help pupils move more when they move from primary to secondary. And all that's indisputable. But then they say use English and maths tests to find out what help pupils need. Now, you can wait for the test at the end of year 1, but maybe there's something else we can do. Why wait till the end of year 1? We know for years the power of intervening early. And you can only intervene early if you know how to intervene and what to intervene with. Now we've got the added confuscation of the Ofsted framework. The Ofsted framework has changed fundamentally, and it is now in action. It is being used for inspections from the 10th of November. And what does it say? It says absolutely clearly early years inspections will be looked through a particular lens. How children achieve how they belong and how they thrive, achieve and thrive. And if we look at the criteria for a strong standard in this area, leaders and practitioners are consistent in making sure that barriers children face are swiftly identified and effectively addressed. Yeah. Barriers are swiftly identified and effectively assessed. And that's why we would like to introduce ALPACA. And Jerry, I'd like you to do a few comments here as we can have a sort of conversation about this because you know there's certain things that caught my eye when I first saw ALPACA. One of them was the fact that it was a game-based screening tool
Oh,
and aimed to catch potentially literacy challenges at the onset of phonemic awareness, making the invisible visible early. Like wow, that is quite a profound statement, uh, Joey. So, what do you think? What do you feel? What made what lit your boat when you saw alpaca for the first time, Joey?
well, I was the undiagnosed dyslexic, so I have skin in this particular game. I know what happens when you fall through the gaps, not from the want of anybody who was not trying to support me. You simply don't know what you don't know, and
Mm,
that's so true. I mean, you mentioned a stat there about the undiagnosed dyslexic in the English context. According to Dyslexia Ireland, 100% of teachers surveyed in one of their most recent surveys reported undiagnosed dyslexics in the class. Over 90 something percent of teachers said we don't have enough training to understand how to support them early. If we only had the data, then maybe we could begin to start looking at what's going on. So for me, I 100% am bought into the fact that no child should ever have to wait to fail for the evidence needed to support them to become available. That's where it all began. And
aye.
when we started doing the research in Trinity College, we realized that the core issue was actually the ability to identify early in an efficient and effective manner. Because before we started the research project in Ireland, England, Northern Ireland, Malaysia, India, UAE, and the USA, over 85% of the children in the early years, reception in year one classrooms, were not being screened longitudinally. They were being screened at a single point in time, and only 15% were screened at a single point in time, usually after 18 months.
Yeah.
But getting
Yeah.
snapshots is not a way to build a relationship with a child, simply isn't.
Totally agree. Totally agree. I always say run a video of a child's life and not take a snapshot. Absolutely. So these are just some points before we go into the detail of what alpaca can do and is. The first and most important bit is that it is developmentally appropriate. In other words, it's appropriate for the age group and it is fun. Children engage with it, children love it, and it's not perceived as a test. And then the output will allow more tailored approaches to meet children's needs right from the onset of formal education. I think the identification of need before a child senses or feels failure is a wonderful, wonderful investment in time. It's simple. And that's another thing. This is teachers are busy. They don't need complicated models. They certainly don't need to be sucked out of class for 20 minutes a child in order to conduct a test. It will improve a child's reading skills by ensuring they receive the right support. And the most important thing is freeing up staff time and enabling early interventions through that support rather than testing children. It aligns to earliest pedagogy, it builds confidence and allows for adaptive teaching. It enhances existing schemes and supports early intervention. I think that's pretty good for one small app. Summarized, early assessment leads to early identification, which leads to early intervention. Wonderful, wonderful. Now, I'm not an early years specialist. If I have a specialist area, it's about the other aspects really of developmental psychology and also the application in pedagogy. But I do like this analogy of reading being, if you like, a number of threads that come together. And one of the most important fundamental threads is this whole thing about word recognition. I'm not a great fan of the phonics tests, but I do see the need for phonological awareness, of course. That is one of those fundamental threads, as well as sight recognition. And what Alpaca does, it looks at those fundamental building blocks. Do you want to say something about those building blocks, Joey?
Yeah, well, I do too much cooking for my own good, I'll be honest with you. And what teachers have told us is if children can't identify the ingredients that are going to be needed to make the recipe, there's no point in handing them the recipe. This is
Yes.
going to tell them very simply if they can identify the difference between a tomato and an onion, a bit of garlic, and the garlic and the egg itself before we say, let's make an omelette. It builds confidence in the child to be able to work with and manipulate and for us to understand their ability. But really, it yields confidence in the teachers to be able to move forward or to be able to pause even before instruction begins. Because with Alpaca, it's not a phonics tracker per se, it's an assessment of and an assessment for learning. And oftentimes we'll look at areas that haven't yet been instructed to make sure that we're aware that there's going to be a fundamental underlying need in existence before we begin, so that we can pay a little bit more heed when we actually are instructing in that space rather than waiting for instruction to finish. So by getting these building blocks right, Marius, you really are setting everybody up for the best chance to succeed.
Thank you for that, Joey. Thank you. Um, so we we will describe the tool and Joey will talk through the tool presently. But you've got these three assessment points, haven't you, Joey? And you're looking at certain, if you like, game-based tasks that the child does through this, and it supplies, if you like, some basic screening information about some of those early components of reading, correct?
100% correct. So we spent a lot of time gamifying it just to make it very simple and engaging for the children. So once they stick on a little pair of headphones, they can be Primark special, and they're playing on their tablet device. They're immersed in this little game. So
Uh-huh.
we typically screen 5 to 6 areas at each of the screening points. And there are screeners for both reception and year one. And they get pedagogically and developmentally sort of they're aligned with the progression of the child, in line with instruction in the classroom, but also in line with compounding our understanding and building that relationship of the underlying need of each child. So these little
Wonderful.
hugely helpful.
So we've got a few screenshots here, haven't we, Joey, of the
Yes.
tool in action?
Yeah, well, do you know what this came about was you've got a group of children. We have in Ireland and in England, it's the same. You know, there's huge cohorts of English as a second language. There's huge AEN. There's large amounts of differences within each classroom. So we discovered early on that if we created a little series of videos, we basically create a 15-second video of each of the types of tasks that are going to be asked at a screening point. So the video might be 2 minutes long in total. But teachers universally now show those videos in class before they bring the students down to be screened. It lands it as a concept, it lands it as it's a game. It demystifies and destigmatizes it. Children don't know they're going to get screened and they line up to go and get tested, which is absolutely fabulous. So this little video lands what's going to happen, and teachers actually make a classroom activity out of it to see if people might know the answers, what do you think happens here, and so forth. So it really landed the game into the space of the children and allowed the children to take ownership of what happened next.
I see, and I can see at the bottom of that screenshot there's an alpaca and there's bales of hay. I'm presuming that as they go through the test, the alpaca takes a big bite.
Yeah, that's what Alfie is the alpaca. Alfie is eating the bales of hay, so the children are delighted to see their progression. You'll actually notice the area at the bottom of the screen, those three pictures, the tin and the sad boy and the bee are grayed out. After a lot of testing and research, we discovered, I mean, what we knew to be true, which is children of 4, 5, and 6 years of age are prone to tapping anything that might be flashing and moving. So how do you get reliable information? And for us, how do you get the evidence you need to make solid evidence-based resourcing decisions? So we grey that out as the questions are being read out. The children cannot input, they can tap the screen all they want, but nothing is going to be received until the question is finished. And then those grey areas will light up so that an answer can be selected. So it was another little way for us just to try and ensure the efficacy of the data that we were getting, and it wasn't just a child randomly guessing. So the little in-class videos and little system pieces like this actually were really, really useful to assist. And actually, if I may, Marius, now that I think of it, what we screen 6 children more or less in 20 minutes, and we say it's 30.
Wow, I
But
see.
you can break the game down into its individual components if a child needs to be tested one-to-one as well. So that's another little thing that can be done.
I see. And you basically you have a target. You say the words. The children then do things like, in this particular case, phoneme matching. And the feedback's instant to the teachers, obviously. And what's nice, when I notice the test being played, you don't give the child an indication of whether they got it right or not. The
No,
alpaca smiles and moves on, and
no,
so
exactly.
and so yeah, you get a sort of engagement because of the fun aspect. But actually, you're also getting a lot more. You're getting the diagnostic information of whether the child is seeing and noting and the cognizance around early reading as they build up a picture.
That's
Amazing.
that's exactly it. And to draw your attention also on this particular slide, we give in the platform a list of all of the words and all of the images that are used at every screening point. And teachers will usually just refer to those before they begin screening, just to see if there's any words that might be culturally unfamiliar to a child. So this isn't a test of English. This is a test of phonological phonemic awareness. But yeah, exactly that. It's very reassuring for the child. They don't get triggered by big success points or failure points. They keep happily going through and they take ownership. It's a nice thing to watch.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. So I must say that is such a brilliant picture. There's some children um on their pads on and on their tablets with the headphones on and engaged engaged beautifully in it. You get the instructions and then uh, I could the rhyming bit here. So
Yeah,
give me an example of what might be said.
well, for example, on the picture you had a couple of slides ago, it said this is for sun with initial phoneme matching.
Yeah.
Sun, and we had tin, sad, and bee. This
Yes.
slide sort of indicates we never tell them if they get it right or wrong. So that's what this slide is telling us. But when they do answer that, then the answer will light up on the screen. They'll get a ping exactly like that. In this
Yeah.
case, sun and sad are what we know to be true. The child has actually correctly guessed it. But if they'd actually selected B here, it would light up the exact same way. It would go yellow. They get a big flashing circle around and then move forward happily. So it's very simple and intuitive for a child to follow. And we say
Fantastic.
at the end of a particular task or intermittently throughout, congratulations, well done, keep doing, you're doing great. We keep them motivated throughout. And
Yeah.
this is what the children are doing all this hard work to get us to this point, Marius.
And this is amazing because almost instantly the teacher gets a dashboard. Could you explain the dashboard, please?
In real time. So literally, as soon as the child has finished a set of questions, the results will appear here. So on the left-hand side, you can see our fictitious student names, student 3, 7, 6, 4, 8, 1, and 5. And across the top at this particular screening point, are the areas that were screened. So rhyming, initial phoneme, phoneme blending, letter name, and deletion. So this is the raw score, as it were. This is the score of how the child performed against that particular assessment or task. So they got 31% or 62%. There's a little toggle on the page as well, and they can toggle between the percentage against the test and the relative position of that child in the class. How many children are beneath them in the class? So
That's wonderful.
filter very, very quickly what's happening. And we also in real time standardize the scores as well. So there's
Yeah.
3 different aspects, but these are all stack rankable. You can click on letter name or click on rhyming and it will rank them underneath the heading or whichever tag that you would like them to do. So we put them red indicates it's 0 to 20%. White means that they're the 60% and higher or 40% and higher. And the yellow stroke green here is 20 to 40. And we have recommendations then based on how each child is performing.
We'll go back to some of the data analysis in a minute. But another feature I thought was so strong about ALPACA was the recommendations button. And what the recommendations button does, it leads to immediate downloadable resources, which can inform TAs or classroom teachers about the particular aspect of early literacy that the tester might be showing a strength or a need at. But more than that, it will also give some easy to implement classroom practice and recommended reading to go with it. Now, I know every school has their own reading recovery programs, their early reading programs, but I think what this also does immediately is help teachers to help the children and us, and also, I suppose, parents, Joey, is that right?
Yeah, well, one of the things you touched on it, in terms of the capacity of the system and so forth. We found from our teaching population that confidence is a huge component in this. Um, the data is interesting, but what can I do next? And those additional support for children in the bottom 20 percentile were really game changing for teachers to give them practical next steps. But the real link was when we started getting the parental involvement. So as you said, many schools will use Big Cat or having recovery, whatever it might be. They'll have their own bank of resources there.
Mm.
In this case here for phoneme isolation, the suggestion is that the parent might change their bedtime reading to if you give a pancake. Every school without exception, if they haven't got a book like that, they have something in their library that they're able to send home with the child and allow that to happen. So what's happened here is we've seen parents' trust and faith in the educators increase hugely because we're now talking about things that were previously invisible and we're giving tangible bite-sized pieces that the parents can get involved in. And that seems to be building a real bond of trust between the parent and the
Fantastic.
education space.
Superb, superb.
Mm.
And we're going back now to individual student views. And okay, you do get, if you like, the simple view of strengths and performance, but also some of the needs. But you can dig deeper. There's a little symbol right at the end of the strip, and if you click on that, um, you get the full you get the full diagnostic. You get the full diagnostic of that student, the words they got right, the words they got wrong, and I suppose that forensic data is useful for teachers. Correct,
Yeah,
Joey?
correct, Mary. So on the previous slide, or even at the top of this page, that single line of data that we're showing there, rhyming, phoneme, blending, letter name, and deletion. Every school uses those at their parent-teacher meetings, whether the child is performing exceptionally or as expected or less than they would hope. There's always opportunity to celebrate success, and there's opportunities really for the first time to identify underlying needs and say, do you know what? we can work on this together. This is what we're going to do at school. Those recommendations come into what you can do at home. So this is what we call the parent report card, and this is used universally
Mm.
with parents. The additional data then absolutely feeds into trying to help a teacher understand the patterns behind their class, the areas of strength, the areas where additional support could be provided. And it's beginning to change practice considerably. And you'll see later on as I talk about, 80% of schools in Ireland have
Certainly.
moved additional
Mm.
resources because of this data.
One of the things as a teacher, I still remember those days, even though I'm coming to the end of my time in education. But I often looked at the wrong answer because looking at the wrong answer sometimes gave you an insight as to perhaps the cognitive processes that the child went through to get the wrong answer. So actually having the wrong answer down is quite a powerful tool, I think.
It's what teachers are using. So within the system, as you'll be showing in a moment, we give different views depending if you're in the special eds team or if you're the mainstream classroom teacher or a TA. And of course, that's the piece about Alpaca as well.
Mm.
We've discovered in the pilot so far, a lot of teaching assistants are jumping in to do the screening because you don't need to be technically proficient in phonological and phonemic awareness. But when the teachers get this data, then it shines a light on things that their gut normally saw, but they never had the evidence to actually bring to the surface.
Superb. And we're all sadly, I say sadly, I hate the bell curve in education. It really makes me feel a bit ill sometimes, especially when you see the odd-shaped bell curve when it comes to examination boundaries. But that's another discussion. Tell me a little bit more about how the data feeds out into this,
Yeah, well,
Jamie.
this normative curve that we're looking at here, we'd expect the child to be within the purple band there, within the average range. So in real time, again, as this child's scores are entering onto the teacher dashboard, these views are being created by the system. Now, this wouldn't be your go-to primary place
No.
to look at data, but when you have a suspicion about a child, this is when you can begin to start interrogating a bit further. And that information is available for every child in real time. And what we
Yes.
do is provide some training in the platform, and we have some videos we'll be releasing to our pilot cohort as well, in terms of how to practically use the information in the class.
Lovely.
So
And I suppose those coloured bars at the bottom there indicate the different elements of the phonemic,
exactly.
the
So
output of
those
the
are the
test.
5 areas that were screened at this particular screening point. If this was a live system, when you hovered over it, it might say that the one beside the 100 was initial phoneme, and the green one in the middle might be blending or rhyming. But
I
when you
see.
hover over the middle, tell you exactly what they are, and those colors stay
Perfect.
consistent throughout the
Oh,
system.
wonderful, wonderful. Another lovely viewpoint here.
Yeah.
I can see it being very useful for to direct, if you like, some whole class teaching. It gives you indication of where you might, as a class teacher, put the literacy effort.
Everything we've done so far, Marius, has been co-created with schools, co-created with educators, co-created with parents, with teachers. And this was something that was requested by the teachers themselves because,
Really?
yeah, which I know, which is
Oh,
great.
fantastic, fantastic.
Yeah, so I mean, we all know about how data can inform the child and help the child. But a teacher was saying, maybe how I am instructing this class might not actually be landing. Now, in this case here, you go, well, non-word reading, that's not a thing. How am I going to impact non-word reading? But it talks about the ingredients that make up non-word reading.
Hmm.
So it was interesting that this came from educators to say, could you just help me in my own practice, help me with reflective practice, help me give a more graduated approach to my teaching. Let me look and see if every child should be instructed equally, or maybe I need to change my practice in a sort of holistic manner based on the cohort in front of me. So it was really interesting. This was invited and brought into us by classroom teachers.
I love that. I love that idea, and we must continue this discussion about co-construction because of the pilot that's coming up. So we'll hold that thinking. And again, another view where you look at the students and you can flag up those in particular areas. Again,
This,
guiding, if you like, pedagogy. Yeah.
that's it. This one actually came from our special education friends who said, Could you give us some insights early so we can support the classroom teachers or at least give them some guidance? Each of these areas that represent the 4 or 5 areas that were screened at a particular screening point. In this case here, the 25% in red for initial phoneme, the system is saying that student 58 and student 60 would greatly benefit from some small group intervention or in-class activities in the area of initial phoneme. So again,
Wow.
it does what teachers and special education teams will do by interrogating the data, but it does it instantaneously and allows you to move on.
Wow. Again, another tool to target meager resources at the area that would make the biggest difference. Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. Um, Now, the other thing is, this is a longitudinal tool as well. I noticed that in the pilot, you're advocating in year five, in those early years, in years 1 and year 2, 3 screening points, and that allows you to basically assess the progress that young people are making and whether the intervention that you're putting in is actually working.
That's it in a nutshell. And this is fictitious data here, so don't mind the oddity of how there's 4 and 3 and 1, but that's the very piece. We're longitudinally tracking a child. Really, we'll be tracking them over 6 screening points all the way to the year 1 phonics test. But you're beginning to see quantitative data then getting enriched with qualitative data. So we're getting a better understanding of the child, the teacher, and the parental needs and how they can support as well. So it has that phonics tracker element to it, but really it's a part of rather than the core thesis behind it.
I'm now sensing, having been, I feel like a cluster or a system leader in my past. It's possible then, using Alpaca, to then aggregate schools across a cluster of schools, perhaps, where you could perhaps compare individual interventions that schools are doing, where you can look as a region or as a multi-academy trust or a smaller cluster where there are strengths and needs and perhaps commission global interventions to make a difference where you feel it might have the best difference. Do you sense the tool might be used in that way as well?
It is being used in that way, and actually there's somebody on the call at the moment we'll be chatting to on Wednesday, where we're co-creating some structured interventions so we can measure the efficacy of the interventions that are taking place. Why? Because Gillian in Dorset and Mary in London, the class and the teacher will look at that child like they've never existed. But in actuality, we can see what interventions are working best in what context within the cluster, within the mat, across the area, and help identify what's going to work best for that teacher in that context for that child. So again, the thesis of the efficacy of interventions and trying to harness the limited learning resources and supports that are available and really deliver a better outcome for everybody.
Oh, I mean, I find that utterly remarkable, because okay, if we look at something like the Education Endowment Fund, which spends millions in doing these blind tests where you've got to find a control group and you've got to find schools that are willing to be in that control group, and then you've got to find after 2.5 years you might get an output. You're basically saying that the output from a cluster doing an intervention like this is at the next point of assessment.
It's exactly that. It's from September to January, and actually there's developments in hand that'll allow schools to remeasure purely across one element that has been screened. So maybe they just purely want to look through the lens of initial phoneme. So yeah, it's incredible how
Yeah.
schools are adopting it and how they're seeing the value in it. So yeah, it's a wonderful changes coming along.
I'll tell you, we have some schools, more about this in a minute, but we have some schools who have started an English pilot already. And it's quite lovely to see some of these quotes coming back already. Not only are schools sort of children are confident to do it, enjoying engaging with the tool, um, but there's teachers already saying, "Oh, I can see where things are going." And again, this is about a tool across the ability range. It's not just about identifying weaknesses. It's about, if you like, the assurance that things are going well, and fine tuning the support you have. I would get an awful lot from these two quotes, Joey.
Yeah, and as an organization that sort of started across three universities, and we're working with three more universities at the minute, it really gives us confidence that educators are open to saying, what can I do if I can trust the evidence that's in front of me? And this is what people are saying. Can the children engage? Yes, they can. Who might need an
Superb.
intervention? It's phenomenal, Marius. It really
Yeah.
is.
And I love this slide. I won't spend long on it, but when you get the slide deck, do have a read of some of these quotes. Principals, Senkos, teachers, they are all who are engaging in the program. They're really getting the stuff out of it. And the marvelous thing about a tool, I think, like Alpaca, is that it unlocks professional curiosity. It doesn't put the dampers on what you're doing. Teachers are thinking, what next? What if? How can I? And those are superb questions for a tool like Alpaca to enable.
And one of the things really interesting, the thesis of making evidence-based resourcing decisions, we're seeing principals in particular really sit up and listen to their classroom teachers. If the classroom teachers are researchers now for the first time, because they're not coming with I think and I feel, they're coming with data to support a conversation. And it's opening
Yes,
up possibilities that didn't previously exist.
I love that. Data to support a conversation. Beautiful, beautiful. Music to my ears. So you are you're ahead of the game. What's happening in Ireland is, of course, where you began, and uh, 40,000 40,000 infants screened. That's an incredible number. One in four using the tool. And already you are seeing qualitative stuff coming out, less withdrawal, more early interventions, more collaboration, and now you're also getting some longitudinal data through.
Yeah.
Wow. So what's some of the longitudinal data saying? Of course, early years still, and there's lots of crunching to be done.
Well,
But
the longitudinal data, we can see patterns across the divide. We can see from socioeconomic, we can see from familial history, we can see from um, disadvantaged areas, should we say, or from EAL or AEM. So we can see all sorts of patterns. Again, it really reinforces the gut instinct of the educators to help understand where to deploy resources. But we're seeing less withdrawals to the special education team after 2 years. 80% of the schools in Ireland have moved additional learning support hours into supporting whole class or small group intervention work in the infant classrooms because it takes 4 times less resources to catch a child and work with them early than to remediate when the child is in third class. So the numbers stack up pretty quickly, but there's a level of inclusivity here, and that inclusivity goes to the collaboration and the confidence between all of the educators in the school. That divide, invisible as it may be, between classrooms and special education
yes,
is now evaporating because they're using the same information to inform how
yes.
they can all support.
Oh, Mike, that's wonderful. Well, the purpose of this webinar is basically to recreate the happening in Ireland, um, in England. We, as Microlink, passionately believe that alpaca will make a difference in England, and so we've started a pilot. We've started to sign up some schools, and we are trialing the alpaca paradigm, the alpaca app, within the English system. Um, the reason why that first area is grayed out is that we have some schools already on the pathway. Uh, but we are still really, really keen to create, to recruit another cohort of schools to begin assessments in mid-January and mid-June. There's no, I don't think there's any loss really for some of the schools joining after that first screening point, are there, Joey? Because the data is coming in, and from mid-January to end of Feb, the schools will get just as rich a flow of data from that screening point as they would have done had they started. Yep.
They will. They will. Yeah, we still have some schools in the first phase. We're still finishing out at the moment. So, the busyness of back to school time and all the rest now is actually might be a simpler time to be able to think about how to embed Alpaca and, of course, the support of our team. So, no, the data is going to inform an awful lot after one term of instruction in school.
Totally, and essentially, schools that join have a chance to test Alpaca out with those two test points, so that they'll be ready to, if you like, engage fully in Alpaca for the start of the following year. So a wonderful opportunity to trial it. And I have to say, we are open to schools joining without charge at these screening points. Yep. And then they can make a real assessment whether it's going to make a difference to their schools or not.
There's going to be a data set by the end of this, and I'll talk about this data set in a second. There'll be a data set at the end of even two screening points that's going to inform what happens between reception and year one. Another lens with which to look through, and that's a powerful, powerful, powerful lens.
Okay.
This now, Marius, this is a
I
whole
no
new lens.
no. I wanted to get to this slide all the way through the all the way through the presentation. This is it, because everyone's talking about artificial intelligence in education. Everybody's talking about the power of big data analysis. For me, looking at the trajectories of so many children as they enter secondary school without a specific, if you like, speech, language, and communication needs like dyslexia being noticed. Looking at the trajectory as they start to drop out of the curriculum, look at the way the trajectory begins so early, and then seeing them actually fail in education and actually fail in society. The early identification of dyslexia and similar reading difficulties is for me the holy grail. It could save lives, literally. What you're suggesting from this graph is that as your data points build up, you can identify dyslexic tendencies as early as year two in formal education. Yeah.
Yes, 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 yes. So this is a research data set, 4,000 odd children. The image on the left-hand side, to explain what this is a 3D image, which in theory shouldn't be visible to us, but we've flattened it into a 2D space. The yellows that are emerging after a couple of screening points on the left-hand side versus on the right-hand side, we're into 5 or 6 screening points. So we're then able to bridge the gap between early identification and formal diagnosis and bring confidence as to which children should go on to take an early dyslexia screener, which conversations may be warranted with parents, what instruction may need to be altered based on this child in front of me. I don't need to wait for a diagnosis in which to start behaving slightly differently. So what I love about this is happening in the background while the screening is going on. Nothing additional is happening from a testing point of view. Nothing else is happening that's impinging on picking out that child to make them walk the walk. Every child is getting screened along the journey, and we're using the data to inform classroom practice, special education needs support, parental engagement and communication, and then the early identification of dyslexia. And the system will grow in confidence, as you said, at each screening point.
Oh,
I think it's quite phenomenal.
And for me, as you know, Jerry, Microlink passionately believes in positioning assistive technologies into mainstream classrooms, so that things like screen readers are as available to young people as a pen and a pencil. Now, combine that philosophy with this early identification tool, and what you start to see is the social model of disability writ large. In other words, What we're doing is creating an environment that is accessible, making learning accessible, and perhaps those yellow dots saying to the children as early as year 3 and year 4, uh, giving them permission to use screen readers to access the quality teaching and the quality curriculum that teachers are already delivering. How powerful is that?
We have a community of practice here in Ireland across state agencies and NGOs and universities and researchers and classrooms. It's quite amazing when you see how AI can be used for good, but in a way that is non-intrusive,
Hmm.
but yet provides confidence to everybody along the journey. Anyway, I'm in awe of the people who've got incredible brains on the team that bring this to life. I think it's quite phenomenal.
Oh, fantastic. So, Um, I hope you were wowed by that. We already have 50 schools, communities from Kirklees, from Southampton, from East Sussex, who are starting on this journey. We hope to recruit 100 more. Um, we feel this is a wonderful ball of moss rolling downhill, and we would sincerely love you to join. Now, my colleague Hamdi, who's also been on the call, will in the chat pane pull up a link he has already, which is a form. Now, we'll also email everybody who's on this call who's registered for it with the link. So please, if you haven't been able to see the chat pane, you are welcome to if you like, click it now and register an interest, or do it in consultation with colleagues. But we'll make sure you got that link. Um, it's I hope you are as excited about the possibilities of alpaca as I was when I saw it. Um, and we've got some great wonderful people on this call. We've got, for example, Martin. She's the Send in Early Years lead in East Sussex, for learning and autism support. That is wonderful, and I'm so pleased to see East Sussex so engaged in this. And I hope the passion and I hope the feedback that many of you will be supplying over the course of this pilot will just excite and engage so many other school communities in the project. Well, guys, um, I don't think there's any open questions. Hamdi was monitoring them, and I think no, there's nothing there. But we are always available. Education at microlinkpc.com. Education at microlinkpc.com. If you've got any questions or queries, don't hesitate to ask them. If you'd like to speak to Hamdi, if you'd like to speak to Joey, please get in touch. Thank you for staying on the call. Thank you for being here. And if you suddenly get cut off at the end of this, it's because that's what happens. Okay, we're not being rude, but when we stop recording, we stop the webinar. But it's been wonderful seeing all the comments that have been coming in. Um, one of our colleagues has just also put down info at alpaca-assessment.com as a possible route direct to the team at Alpaca. So please get in touch. Hamdi has also put his email address in the chat pane. That's hamdi.hussein at microlinkpc.com. As you can see, we're keen to support you, keen to help, keen to talk.
Thank you
Uh,
so much, Marius.
Joey, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that input. And thank you all for attending and making this such a it's always exciting to see people on the call and willing to learn and willing to raise awareness about amazing tools like Alpaca. On the third we our third webinar of the year, I think that's going to be on Wednesday, the 9th of December. We're going to be showing you a tool called Digit Music. This is a fantastic music making tool designed to engage and empower music making from individuals that might not usually think of being able to make music easily. Amazing handheld controllers that students with mobility problems can engage with, making amazing creative, if you like, opportunities. So that's what we'll be talking about on the 9th, and hopefully see some of you then. Thank you, and goodbye from us. Goodbye from Jerry. Goodbye from Hamdi. Take care.
Okay, take care.
Thank you.